Hey everybody, welcome back. Brantley here. Section 2, Creating the Base Mesh. Title of our first video today is Creating Our First Base Mesh. So we're going to get our hands dirty today and get into creating our first object in Blender, which I know you've all been excited to start. It's going to be a Lego motorcycle that I have here in the house. We're going to first dive into Blender and set up our layout with pictures to reference as we create our Lego motorcycle. So let's jump in and get started. So you'll open up Blender and you'll have a screen similar to mine that looks like this. You'll want to remember the ways to navigate around that we went over in our previous day, because that's going to come in very useful here as we start to navigate around and create our base mesh. So to start, I'm gonna enable my screencast keys. So if you look down here in the bottom left, you'll be able to see what buttons I'm pushing as far as letters, and I'm also going to tell you, but sometimes it makes it easier if you can just see it at the bottom there. It's also an add-on that can be added into Blender 3D. That's the great thing about Blender, is there's add-ons that have been created by third parties that you can access and add to your build. And I actually have a YouTube video on how to enable screencast keys, and there's several others out there as well. But to start, we're going to go ahead and delete everything off our screen here because we don't need it. So we're going to press the letter A to deselect everything on the view, and then press A again to select everything. And then we'll press the letter X for delete, and then we can click delete here or just press enter, and it's going to delete everything off of our screen. And now we have a clean slate in our 3D view, and we can get ready to add our reference pictures, because that's important when you're trying to model something of the real world. You want reference pictures so that you can get the size and orientation close to correct as possible. So to start that, I'm going to show you over here the N key. N as in Nancy. Opens up your... So to get our reference pictures put into the system, we're going to go ahead and press the N key, N as in Nancy. That'll bring up our screen properties panel over here on the right side. And we're going to scroll down and go down here to background images, where we're going to click on the arrow and we're going to say add an image. These images are going to be available for you to download on the GitHub server that's part of this course. So we're going to make sure that we have image selected here, and we're going to want to open up our computer. Mine's in the download folder, so I'm going to go ahead and find it here in the download folder, and I'm going to do the right side of my item. And the reason why I labeled it right side is because we're going to make sure the images only appear when we change the view to a certain viewpoint. So this one would be in the right viewpoint, and I'm going to show you how to do that right here. So it says right now the axis is selected on all views, but what we're going to do is click this, and since it's the right side of the motorcycle, we're going to select the right view only, and that's right orthographic, and I'll show you why that's important to remember in a little bit. So now that we have our picture selected, it's a single image, doesn't matter, this color can stay the same. We can make the opacity a little bit less or more if you would like to make it not so visible. But now that we have this selected and open, we're going to go over here to our view. And if you're already emulating your numpad, or if you have a numpad, then to get to the right view, it's numpad 3. So we can either click here or we can press 3 on our numpad. And you can see that we don't see anything yet, because if you notice, we're in the right perspective view. We want to be in right orthographic. So if we click on our view option here again, we can see to change from perspective to orthographic, it's numpad 5. So I'm going to go ahead and click 5 here. Now, as you can see, we have our reference image here that I just took a couple pictures of this Lego motorcycle. Now we're going to manipulate the picture to kind of center it in the 3D view. So you can see here that we can flip it and we can add rotation to it, which we're going to do here to get it. We can also move it up and down. So definitely going to need to rotate this guy 90 degrees so that he's sitting up. And then we can move him on the y-axis here, or actually z-axis in this aspect, And I'm just going to put the wheels just kind of right above that y-axis here so we can see that that's kind of centered in the view. And then we're going to go ahead and add our other reference picture. So that picture's done, ready to go. It's pretty much centered on the axis as far as in the center here. And now we can go ahead and add another image. So I'm going to click Add Image again here. It's going to put down a new box that we can now open up another image. I'm going to go to my Downloads folder and find my front view. I find front view and a side view is what you really need for copying something in the real world. Kind of those two references will be able to kind of get you the orientation that you want. And so you can see it's kind of overlapping our other view here because it's still selected to show up on all views. So we're going to go ahead and select it to front view. And now it's gone from this view. So we're going to go ahead and see what our front view is, our shortcut. So our front view is numpad 1. Go ahead and click that and you can see here's our picture, and we're still in orthographic view. So we don't need to press 5 to change that. Perspective view is kind of the more 3D, and then orthographic is kind of the 2D view, like top down if you were looking at an old 2D video game. So now that we have this selected here, we're going to manipulate it to kind of get it in the right rotation that we want, and we definitely want it rotated at 90, so clicking that in there and pressing 90 is probably the easiest way to do that. We're also going to just click it and drag to the side to kind of bring it up just a tad. And then we'll move it just a tad on the x-axis to kind of get it as close to the center as we can so that it's kind of oriented together with the other picture. And so there you have it. That's how you can add any reference picture that you would like for you to be able to model things that are in the real world and get them from your thoughts or the real world into the system. So this is a great reference to have and a way to reference these things. And that's how you add pictures to your referencing. So just right over here. Pretty simple, right? I thought so. Now we can get started on building our base mesh. So we're going to start our base mesh here, and there's no rule book that's written that says, oh, you got to start building this object with a square or building it with a cylinder. This is where your creative mind kind of comes into play. And so I'm going to walk us through this one and show you how I would do it. There may be different ways that you would rather do it or how to create it here, but I'm going to kind of show you. What I notice here is that right in the middle we kind of have this square that's already here, part of the front panel to the motorcycle. So I'm going to go ahead and create a square, a cube. You can come over here to this panel and do the create cube, or you can press Shift A and that brings up your create toolbar, and you can go to mesh and then click a cube. Either way, you get your cube here where your origin is, and we can move it over, move it up. We're going to press S to scale it. Just press S and then kind of drag your mouse to kind of scale it down and kind of move it into place, and there, that looks pretty good. So now we kind of got the very beginning of our front console for our bike. We're probably going to want to now go over to the other view, the right view, remember, numpad 3, and see how we're kind of off on the view there. So we can kind of move it over, move it down. We're going to press scale, and we're going to do it on the y-axis, which is the green line. So now we're going to scale it on the y, so you're going to press S for scale, Y for y-axis, and then it's going to let you scale it in, make it a little thinner. And then we're going to do rotate for R. You're going to click R for rotate, and we want to rotate it on the x-axis to kind of give it that diagonal rotation there. So I clicked R for rotate and X for x-axis, and now I'm just going to bring my mouse down and kind of put it right there on that where it kind of looks like it's right there. And there we go. We have our first piece. Then we can numpad 1 back over to our front view, and we can see that we're a little bit off on this, but we're good on the right side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale it just a little bit on the Z axis. So I'm going to hit S for scale and Z, and I'm just going to make it a little bit taller. Just a little bit taller there. Kind of give it, and that's pretty close to that. So I can hit Whoops, I hit 5 for perspective mode. We want to always stay in orthographic if we're looking around. And that kind of fills us in just a little bit here. And there we go. We got our first piece, and if we kind of move our mouse over, we can kind of see that it's just one little piece of rectangle, but we know what it's going to be. And we're going to start with that. So now let's hit 3 again to look at our right. Let's hit 1 to go back to the front. And now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to extend these sides out. So now you can kind of zoom out and zoom in, and we can get a little closer to see what we're working with here. Now that we have kind of this front panel, and we know that if we press 3 that we have it kind of at the right orientation here. It doesn't need to fit exactly how the reference picture fits, but as long as you're getting the right size. So now we can see that we want to extend out and make kind of these handles coming out here. I'm also noticing that I'm going to want to scale this down a little bit more in the Z because I don't want it that tall. Do that so it's not going into the wheel. And so now we can see that we want to just kind of extend out these sides, and we're going to start creating these arm handles in the front kind of chassis of the motorcycle. So how do we do that? Well, right now we're in object mode. You can get to another mode. Edit mode is the one we're looking for. We're going to press tab, and that's going to get us into edit mode. And now you can see that we're highlighted. We have our object selected in edit mode down here. We're going to want to select faces. And if you remember, there's ways to work with the vertices or the face or an edge, and you can change that by clicking these down here. So if we want to change it to faces, we'll just click our face orientation here, and now we can select individual faces as we go around. And this is also a good time to show you the mirror modifier, because what we do on one side we're going to want to kind of do on the other side as well, just because it is a symmetrical bike. So with our object selected, we'll go back to object mode with tab, because you can only put modifiers on object mode. So now that we're in object mode, by pressing tab, we have our object selected. We can come over here to our properties panel, and we can go to modifier, which is this little wrench display. Brings up our modifier window. We can click add modifier, and we're going to find the mirror modifier, which is right here. We're going to click that. We want our x-axis to be what mirrors out, and we're going to want it to merge. If it kind of meets in the middle, it'll just kind of merge the vertices and create one item, and everything else we can kind of leave just default. So now that we have that applied, we can go back into edit mode with tab, and we want this face selected, this right face. We're going to click 1, numpad 1 to see our front view, and now we want to bring this face out to kind of start creating this front chassis here and part of the handlebar. So we're going to click E for extrude, which means bring the face out. E is an elephant. And we kind of want to extrude this on the x-axis, which is the orange line that you see popped up there. So press extrude on, and then press X for X, and then you can bring it out, and you can see that it's mirroring exactly what we're doing on the other side. So we're not going to have to go do the same thing we're doing right now on the other side. It's already going to do it for us. So once you hit E, you hit X to do it on the x-axis, you bring it out just a little bit, you're going to left click, and that's going to finish your extrusion. So that's what we're going to do now. We're just going to start extruding where we want to go. So if we kind of come out and we can go to the side or go up to the top, this is going to be the beginning of our handlebar. So you want to select that top face, and then click numpad 1 so you can see what you're doing. Hit extrude, and we're going to want to do it, hit E for extrude, and then we're going to want to do it on the Z-axis, which is up and down. And we're going to just pull it out like this. And let's kind of click it here. So as you can see, I did it on the Z-axis, which brought it up, and I didn't want it to do that. I wanted it to continue up. So I can click Command Z or Alt Z if you're on a Windows, and that's going to undo that last move. So now we can press our numpad 1 and we want to extrude E for elephant. It's going to extrude it straight out now since I didn't click Z. You just click E and it's going to extrude it out the orientation that we're wanting to keep. So now once we get to that part, you can see that it's extruded out like that. So let's continue up. Let's extrude our next piece. There we go. Now that we've kind of extruded it up to the top, you can see that we have this handle bar that comes out of the side. So you're probably asking, well, how do we make this? This will be way too wide to make it look like a handlebar. So I'm going to show you now. If we move over here to our view, I'm going to show you how to cut an extra line into any piece of mesh that you have. So I'm going to show you how to create another edge loop that will turn this piece into two pieces. So you're going to hit Control R, and that's going to bring up this purple hue, which kind of shows you that it's looping all around this square, and that's exactly where we want it. If we wanted to add more, you just roll the dial on your mouse, or as far as like using the magic mouse, I just roll up and it'll make more edge loops. But since we only want one, I'm going to roll it back down, the mouse roller, and select this one. And so I'm going to left click, and now it allows me to move it up and down if I would like, but we kind of just want it right kind of in the center where it was. And I'm going to make another left click, and there we go. Now we have another edge loop that makes this a smaller piece to the puzzle. So of course that takes us to the edge mode. We don't want that anymore. We want to go back to face mode. And we can select this face now, hit numpad 1 to go back to the front view, and we can extrude out. Now you see that I'm extruding out and it's going straight, and it kind of has like an angle to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press G for grab. Kind of want to move it on the Z axis. You grab it, press Z, G for grab, Z for Z axis, and then kind of give it that flare. Now you can see that the handles look kind of good like that. I like that. I realize that these are squares. We'll show how to make them more circular here in the future. We could have used a cylinder for this part, but I think a square will work just fine, and then we can make it more of a circular later on. We can add faces to it and add more to the mesh. So now we can see that we kind of have the front chassis going here. Numpad 1, numpad 3, look on the other side, and we can see that we're above the picture. We can bring this down. I have the face still selected, so I'm going to want to tab back over into object mode where I can move my entire object instead of just one face. Just kind of bring this down a little bit to give us a better reference area. But I think this is looking pretty good so far. We kind of got the handles flared out. If we wanted to move them back a little bit, we could. Just tab back into edit mode and kind of just give it a grab, and we can press G for grab, and we can move them back a little bit to give them that inward flare, which most motorcycle handles have. They don't flare out this way. So far so good. Let's hit numpad 1. Let's look at the front. You can see that we can hit tab to go back into object mode and move it up. I'm going to kind of speed up the process here a little bit. And let's hit back tab to go back to edit mode. We still have mirror on, so we can select our face with a right click. You can select the face, and we're going to extrude that down now. Kind of make the bottom. You can bring that all the way out like this. I'm going to press G to grab and kind of move it out just a hair, just so it has room for that tire that we're eventually going to put in there. And then click it like that, and that's pretty good. It's kind of the front of our bike there. And hit numpad 1 to look back at this. And then we can extrude it down even more to make that hub. Press G to kind of flare it out just a little bit. And then you can see that that's still kind of straight. It's going pretty good. Hit numpad 3. We can see that we can hit tab and go back into object mode and move this back just a little bit to kind of get that. And it doesn't have to be perfectly lined up with your reference. Again, this is, like I'm saying, it's a reference picture to help you build the model out to what it's supposed to look like as far as dimensions and orientation. So you can see that this is kind of a handlebar of a bike just by looking at it. And so what's next? Well, let's start building this chassis out right here in the middle, this motor. So we can scroll back here, hit tab to go into edit mode so we can see our faces. And we can see that this is going to be our motor chassis coming out. As we can see here, it kind of juts out and comes down. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to scroll back here. I'm going to select this face. I'm then going to press numpad 3 to go back to the right view. I'm going to hit extrude and just kind of extrude it out. And hit tab mode, go move this down so I can get this chassis about right. Hit tab to go back into edit mode. That face is selected, perfect. I can rotate this face by hitting R and rotating it on the x-axis, which will kind of bring it down like this. Start kind of making it curve. And then we can extrude out a little bit more. We can rotate it on the X a little bit more to give it more of a curve coming down. And let's Command Z or Alt Z some of that to undo that. I feel like I tab back into object mode, go down a little bit more. Edit mode. I feel like I made this a little too far out. So I'm going to try to extrude that again. And then kind of stop it here. So let's start to extrude this out and kind of make this circular type curve. So what we can do is we can be in edit mode, make sure this face is selected. Go back to our side view, numpad 3. Press E for extrude. Kind of bring it down. We can also hit R for rotate and do it on the x-axis and kind of give it a nice curve right there. Which I'm going to do Command Z and kind of go back. Let's rotate this just a little bit. And this is where creating an object is all how close you want to make it to the real thing. I'm trying to follow this exactly how it wants to be. So I'm rotating that face again, extruding a little bit more, making a little bit more vertices. So we can bring that out a little bit, rotate on the x-axis, hit X for x-axis and bring it down. And here we go. Definitely a little wider, which we can extrude that out a little bit more as we get farther down. But this is going to be kind of the gist of the engine block here. So now you can kind of see that come into life. Let's go ahead and select this face, hit numpad 3. Let's extrude it out to kind of give the block a little bit more of a face, of a body there. And what we can do is we can fill an area in. So you see how we have this kind of cut here. We kind of want to make it one piece. So what we can do is we can go into vertice mode. We can select all those vertices. Now it's kind of get up here to the top. If we hold shift, we can select the different vertices. If you don't hold shift, it'll select a single one if you right click. You can see I'm right clicking over here on my screencast. So let's right click, hold shift, get our vertices all selected here. And then the cool thing about this is you hit the letter F for fill, and it fills that in, fills that space right in with all those vertices. So now we can hit numpad 3 and kind of see that we could probably do that like it is. I'm satisfied with that. And kind of click off of it, press A to deselect everything, and we can kind of tab back over into object mode. You can kind of see the object here. And it looks like that normal is flipped, and let me show you. Tab back over into edit mode. Let's go to face. So that's all one face in itself. So now we can see here in our reference picture how it had those ridges on the motor block. We can do our Control R, and we can add a few more edge loops, do it kind of like this, and we can create those ridges here now. Make sure we're in edit mode, which we are. Click on the faces, and now what we can do is we can kind of bring out those ridges. We can hold shift and select multiple faces. Then we can hit E for extrude, and it should extrude straight out. Just make a little piece like that. Make another one here, E for extrude. Just kind of right out, just like that. You can kind of see those are kind of a little far in there, so I'm going to hit Command Z and just kind of undo what I did here. And then from this view, from behind the motorcycle, we can see it a little better as we extrude out. We don't want to extrude it too much because they're not supposed to look like that far out. Extrude this out with E. There's a couple ridges. I'm good with that. Again, we're just practicing all of our extruding and how we can maneuver around and start creating objects. So we can hit 3. Now we have a couple ridges on our motor block. And now we want to build this circular thing here that we have. Kind of like I guess that's where the bottom of the motor block is. So what we can do is we can use a cylinder at this point. We connect the two objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to my create panel. I can create a cylinder. Go ahead and deselect everything. Tab back over in object mode. Deselect it with A. And then create a cylinder. And it's going to pop out right here where our 3D cursor is. And now it's going to make a new cylinder over here on our outline. You can see how we can select our cube, which is now technically part of our bike. And we can also select our cylinder. If I would have had the cube selected when I created the cylinder, it would have made it one object. And we don't want to do that just yet. We want to first manipulate our cylinder. We definitely want to scale it down, so let's press S for scale and scale it down so that it's not so big. We do want to also rotate it on the Y-axis. So R for rotate, on Y for Y, and you can hit 90 for 90 degrees. Type in 90, 90, and then click, and there you go. We got our rotated cylinder here, which we then can bring down. And let's see where we're at with this. Hit numpad 3. We can bring that down here. And that's kind of our, make sure it's kind of the same size, which it is. It kind of sticks out just a tad, but that's fine. That looks about right. And now we got that in there. And now the cool thing is, we can either use the fill where we select all the vertices and we'll tab over to edit mode where you have to do that. So basically they have to be the same object in order to do the fill. But what we could do is when you have one object selected, whether the cylinder or the cube, you can't put them both in the edit mode at the same time. It's going to either have one in the edit mode. If you go to the other one, it's going to put it back into object mode, and then you can tab over to edit mode. So if we wanted to do them both in the edit mode at the same time, we'd join them into one object. But what I'm going to show you is a way to join two objects together with a modifier. Now that we're kind of done building our front chassis of the motorcycle, we're going to go ahead and apply this mirror modifier. So after you're done using the mirror, you hit apply, and it kind of saves it. Now it's all one object together, and the mirror modifier is turned off at this point. And then our cylinder is also its own object. But let's say we want to merge the two, so let's hit numpad. You know what? Let's select our cube again, tab into edit mode, and bring down, hold select and right click our faces, numpad 3. Let's extrude it down just a little bit, just to kind of make it one piece. And right about there's fine. Now we can tab into object mode. Now we have two objects that are together, but they're each different objects. So let's say we want to join them together and connect their two meshes. So there's an easy way to do that. It's a modifier as well, so we can either select our chassis, cube, or our cylinder. Well, I'll select the cylinder at this point. We'll add modifier, and we'll come over here, and what we're going to want to do is we want our boolean modifier. And you can see this little picture here. It kind of has two objects kind of looking like they're going to be put together. So what a boolean modifier does is it allows you to select an object, which right now we have our cylinder selected, and we're going to apply a boolean to it. But what do we want it to do? I want it to make a union, or actually I want it to intersect. Or we can make a union and it'll kind of combine the two meshes and delete everything in the middle. So let's do a union. I think that'd be better for this application. So you can do a union, you can intersect, or you can do a difference where it'll actually cut out the piece of the cylinder that's touching this other mesh, and it'll make like a little half circle right here on our chassis. But we want to combine the two, so I'm going to select union here, and then it's asking which object do you want to combine it to. So I can click this, and our cube's the only one in here at the moment. If I wanted to select the cube, I could come over here and just kind of click around if I wanted to select. So I'm going to select the cube, and bmesh is the best way to do this. There's a carve, which is another algorithm, but bmesh is the general used, the default, and that works fine. And then you can click apply. And now, if we were to tab into edit mode, or we can do it in object mode too, if we were to come down here to our view, our display, and if we wanted to look at the wireframe, you can see that these are all connected now. You can see as we zoom in that those edges are now cut and they're joined together as one. And it makes it pretty simple to do. So let's go back to our view, our solid view. And now let's say we wanted to make them all one object now, so we can tab them both into edit mode. You're going to go ahead and hit A to deselect all, hit A to select all. We want to select everything in here that we want to join. So now that we have everything selected that we want to join, you can either come down here to Object to manipulate an object and do Join. Control J, though, is also the hotkey. So hotkeys are very smart to get familiar with when you're building an object and you're kind of just messing around, letting your creative juices flow. Your hotkeys are going to get you from point A to point Z way faster than having to navigate these objects here. So I'm just go ahead and hit Control J. And you'll notice here that over in our outline, the cylinder is now one object. There's no cylinder and cube anymore. It's now just the cylinder, because that's the object that we selected first when we selected both of them. So now these objects are combined into one named cylinder. And if you press tab, you can see that you can tab into edit mode now with both of these objects at the same time. So we could conjoin them here a little bit, kind of make our chassis kind of come out. Yeah, so that's how you join with a boolean. Very good information to know. So let's go ahead and keep our chassis coming out here. I'm going to go ahead and select these faces. And what I'm probably going to want to do is these faces can come out here. This is like a little kickstand that we'll have to bring out with another cylinder maybe. There's one on each side that kind of juts out the side. And we can do that easily with a cylinder and just join them with a boolean. We can also combine this down and then extrude it out. So now that we have those two combined, we can be into edit mode here. We can tab it into edit mode, and for the sake of time, let's just kind of fast forward a little bit. I'm going to create probably another rectangle here to kind of add this in, and I'm kind of trying to show you every possible way that you can combine things, and we can go in and select each individual face and extrude it out and make it go right up along here. We can angle them down and extrude them out, or we can just create another object, which is what I'm probably going to do, and just kind of start bringing this out here. So for the sake of time, let's fast forward a little bit and have me do that. So as you can see here, I'm going to create another cube, and you can see that it's not by itself a cube, and I don't want that. I want it to be a separate object if I'm going to apply a modifier to it and take it into the other objects and have it intersect. So I'm going to Command Z to delete that. I'm going to make sure I'm not selected on anything else. And then I can bring in my cube. And now let's fast forward a little bit as I connect these objects and kind of extrude them out to finish the chassis of the bicycle. So as you can see, I was able to apply that boolean again to this part of the chassis. And now we can just bring out, tab into edit mode and bring out these faces. And what I'm going to show you here is what we can do is we can tab back into object mode and add that mirror modifier. Now whatever we do over here, it'll happen over there. Numpad 3. Let's hit E to extrude and bring it out, and we can tell that obviously it needs to be scaled down, so let's scale it. Let's extrude it first, and then extrude it down a little bit, and then scale in the Z to kind of bring it together. Scale, S for scale, Z for Z-axis. Then we'll kind of grab it and bring it down just a little bit. Make sure that that's looking okay. Yep. Then we can rotate on the X and kind of bring it back up straight like this. E for extrude to extrude it out. Grab, G for grab, press Z to bring it up. And there we go. Kind of got our other chassis there. Those are the same. Let's go ahead and apply our mirror monitor. Nope, let's wait. Let's go ahead and create some more loops on this. Control R. Of course, it's going to make a loop pretty big. What I'm going to do here is make that circle piece that we want. So, cut a little faces in here. Stay in edit mode, get back over to face mode. Now we can kind of make this face here with this. So we can extrude it out. Grab on the Z axis, bring it up. Extrude out a little more. Rotate on the X, kind of bring it in. Grab on the Z, bring it down just a tad. Extrude it a little bit more. Rotate on the X. RX. Not for prescription. RX to rotate it some more. Bring it down here. There we go. We can also extrude out bottom part now. Kind of extrude it out like that. Probably should have made it a little thicker, but that's easy enough. We can just extrude it out some more from the different parts. We can also go into vertice mode and just kind of create a fill here, which is what I'm probably going to do. Create a fill that goes up here to these. Hold shift and right click to select the vertices that you want. 4 of them at least, and then press F for fill. Command Z because I didn't select enough. 4 at least, and if we want to fill the whole thing in, we got to tell it that we want the whole thing. F for fill. That's not looking too good. Command Z that. Once you select those 4 vertices and fill, you bridge those edge loops pretty much. Then we can select these vertices here. I need to zoom in to get a good selection. Hold shift, select these 4 vertices. We can make this, press F to fill that in. Makes it a solid object. Fill that in. Now you can see that we kind of have more of a hook there. Probably could bring this edge out just a little bit to make it more circular. So if we click on this edge, we could grab it with G and bring it out. And there we go. We kind of have our loop in there that will eventually put a cylinder in here and add our tires. So I noticed that that mirror modifier was kind of messing up the side over here and adding an extra thick layer of mesh. So I went ahead and deleted the modifier with the X before I applied it. So if you have your mirror modifier up here, you can see how it's kind of building this extra mesh on the side here. So I went ahead and deleted it. Now what we want to do is we want to make sure this is one object, go into object mode, and then add the mirror modifier here. After we've already created this side, we can add the mirror modifier, the X, make sure merge and clipping is on, and then we can kind of view our work here. It looks pretty good. And then we can apply it. Now we have our mirror modifier worked on there, which is good. So let's add those feet pegs in. We can tab into object mode, deselect everything with A, and then that way we can add a cylinder and not have it be part of what we already have. Looks like we need to combine these two anyways, but we'll get to that in a minute. So now we have our cylinder 001. I'm going to rotate it on the y-axis 90 degrees to get it sideways. Then we can left click on these arrows and move it. Let's press S to scale it down to a peg size. Pretty good. Let's press S to scale it on the x-axis to make it a little longer. We could really just bring it all the way through, why not? About where our peg is. So now we can just make sure they're kind of the same length on either side, which they are. Move it just a tad over. Now let's go ahead while we're still in object mode, select everything, deselect everything with A, and then select everything with A, and do Control J to make them all one object, which now they are. Actually, let's Command Z that, and make sure we do our boolean modifier to add this to the mesh. We want it to union with this mesh. And let's apply that. Now they're all combined. Press A to deselect everything, press A to select everything, do Control J to join everything together, and now we have one mesh. That's looking pretty good. Very good. Kind of see our work so far. It's looking like a little Lego motorcycle. Now I didn't do the hooks on this front piece. We're gonna need to do those. And looks like our mirror modifier kind of. So I didn't do the hooks in the front, but I think I'm going to attach those to the wheel when we connect the wheels on and make it a little easier that way. And so here's our first base mesh that we've kind of started to make. We can select everything with A in edit mode and kind of give it a good outline, just to see that we got the motor in there and we have our chassis, and goes back to our hooks for our wheels to hook on when we make our wheels. And we're well on our way to making our Lego motorcycle.